We are continuing today in Perek Aleph, Mishna Hey, Chapter 1, Mishna 5. Yossi ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim Omer. So Yossi, the son of Yochanan, who from Yerushalayim, said as follows: Yehei beischa pasuach l'revacha. Literally again, let your home be open wide. Or really, it could also mean let your home be open to pedestrian traffic. V'yu aniyim b'nei beisecha. Let the poor be amongst the members of your household. V'al tarbesicha ima isha. And do not speak excessively with a woman. And the Mishnah says, Be'ishta amru. This is even talking about one's own wife. Kal v'chon be'eshes chavero. All the more so, ultimately, again, with your friend's wife. Mikan amru chachamim. From here, the sages said, Kozman sha'adam mar besicha me'isha. The more that a person speaks with a woman, gorem, or I should say, the more a person engages in excessive speech with a woman, gorem ra'al yatzmo. He causes negativity for himself. Ubotol midivrei Torah. He goes ahead and neglects the study of Torah. V'sofo yoresh Gehenna. And in the end, he will inherit Gehenna. Okay, so a lot in this Mishnah. So the Rabbeinu Yonah comments on this. He says very beautifully, what does it mean? Yehei beischa pasuach l'revacha, that your home should be open wide. So ultimately, again, he says, he writes in his second parish, he says, O perusho, shi'e beiso kebeis avma v'ra lavashalom, shayedar b'derech b'makom revacha, k'dei she'is achsenu sham ovrim v'shavim, v'haya beiso pasuach l'aber ruchos. Literally, Rabbeinu Yonah says that one's home should be like the tent of Avram Avinu. That just like Avram Avinu lived in an open, expansive area, in order to be able to accommodate the needs of visitors. Avram Avinu's tent was open on all four sides, in order to go ahead and enable him to be able to be machnes orchim, to go ahead and host guests, to provide people with the opportunities that they sought. It's on the most basic level. So the Rabbeinu Yonah understands, Yehi beischa pasuach l'revacha means, let your doors of your home be open wide. Like the tent of Aaron was open on four sides. Okay, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that your home is going to be open on four sides, but the idea is that one's home should be a welcoming and open place. I'll just point out the concept of having a welcoming and open home is not just simply about volume, right? That there's a lot of pedestrian traffic that goes through my home. The concept of having a welcoming and open home also speaks about how do people feel when they enter into my home? Do they feel welcomed? Do they feel accepted? Or do they, chas v'shalom, feel judged? Do they feel marginalized? So keeping the home wide open is not just a function of having many people inside, but about the experience that I create for those who in fact do come into my house. Next, the Rabbeinu Yonah comments, the poor should be counted amongst the members of your home. So here the Rabbeinu Yonah explains something very interesting. He says that, again, quoting the second parish, V'gam shiu haniyim regilin lebeso, v'yamdu sham below boshes panim. The poor should feel comfortable in my home and should not be embarrassed. Sometimes not only does the pauper have to contend with the lack of material means to be able to take care of himself, but there's a stigma, there's an embarrassment, there's a feeling of degradation, a feeling of marginalization. And so over here, when the Rabbeinu Yonah explains, when the Mishna says that the poor should be amongst the members of your home, what that means is, make sure that it's not only the cool kids, right? The in crowd, the wealthy who feel accepted and at home in your house, but rather make sure that even the poor, even those who are struggling, find a place within your home. Such a beautiful idea. He goes on, so this is an interesting one, and perhaps a statement in Pirkei Avos that is a little bit sometimes hard to wrap our head around. Don't speak excessively with a woman. So what does this mean? So first, on the most basic level, the Rabbeinu Yonah writes, "Shesichas hanoshim mevia lidei hiror avera bittul Torah." That excessive speaking with members of the opposite gender could go ahead and create impure thoughts. Now, again, the Rabbeinu Yonah is saying, and I think this is important to acknowledge, that men and women are different, and ultimately, again, that when a man sees. When a man often interacts with a woman, so often again, it's normal and it's natural for his mind to wander. And if those interactions are prolonged, ultimately again, for him to have impure thoughts. We like to think that often we're above all of these things. And halavai, we should be zocha Eretz Hashem, to raise ourselves to a level where we are above these things. But part of the beauty of Torah, part of the beauty of this statement of the Mishnah is a recognition that people are people. And therefore, the Rabbeinu Yonah says, a person should be careful. Person should be careful. You're not a malach. No man, right? Man is a man. He's not a malach. So if man is a man and not a malach, therefore he should be careful with the level of his interactions. He should be careful with those type of interactions. Now, again, the Mishnah doesn't say don't speak with women. The Mishnah says don't engage in excessive chatter. Just be vigilant. Be vigilant with your interactions with the opposite gender, because we are not malachi hasharis. We are not angels. We're human beings with our own desires, with our wants, with our proclivities, with our lusts, and as such, we have to be mindful of those things and not to engage in actions which could potentially fan those flames and get a person into a lot of trouble. Now, the next line is very intriguing. Be'ishta amru kavacham be'eshes chavero. Now, this is even true with one's wife. Right? Now, obviously, again, so what does this mean? In other words, that what am I concerned about if I go ahead and I speak too much with my wife? What's going to happen exactly from that? So, interestingly enough, the Rabbeinu Yonah really understands this in a different way. He understands the statement a little bit more metaphorical. And he says, when the Mishnah says about not going ahead and speaking too much with my wife, what it actually refers to is intimacy. And that maybe in the realm of intimacy, even permitted intimacy, it's important to go ahead and create boundaries. Now here, the Rabbeinu Yonah is referencing a concept that we are very familiar with, the concept of Kiddushim Tziyu. Torah says in Parashas Kiddushim, Kiddush should be holy. And much ink has been spilled to understand what exactly is the Kadosh Baruch Hu asking of us when he demands holiness of us. And again, the Ramban and others explain that really it is a concept that highlights the idea of Kadesh es atzmecha b'ma shemotalach. Sanctify yourself with that which is permitted. In other words, that to find holiness in life, the avoidance of sin is not enough. So the avoidance of sin, of course, is my departure point. But what holiness really requires, ultimately, again, is a willingness to go ahead and even sometimes abstain from that which is permitted. Or in other words, we spoke about this in our earlier shir, creating for myself certain permitted boundaries, or I should say certain boundaries, even within the realm of that which is permitted, in an effort to ensure that I don't transgress. The Ramban gives an example. He says, for example, let's say one wants to eat meat and drink wine 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Is it mutter? Yeah, it's mutter. It's permitted. In other words, there's no prohibition against that. Is it good? Of course it's not good. And I don't mean about your cholesterol, right? But it's not good because what it does is it creates a gluttonous personality. Is a man permitted to be intimate with his wife every single day? So technically, if she's not the nida, if it's halachic, yeah, they are permitted. But what does that do? What does that do? It creates a certain sexual gluttony. It creates a certain lustful gluttony. Again, there's nothing wrong that's happening. But if a person is constantly indulging a particular desire, then by definition they become a gluttonous individual. You could become a gluttonous individual through just through just excessive indulgence in something that is permitted. That's why the meat and the wine metaphor is such a powerful one. So the Rabbeinu Yonah really understands this. He goes over here, he says, V'nira lefarish kipshuto, be'ishto amru, shal lahagila b'dran li'olam k'dei shleim matzui ima b'chol yom, shein la'adam liyos im shalanas. It's really profound. See, he says that speaking, it could be speaking means speaking. In other words, and just talking a lot ultimately, again, could lead to intimacy. But what it could also mean, I think, on a general level, is speaking itself could be the metaphor for intimacy. And the Rabbeinu Yonah teaching us in this statement over here of just even being careful with overindulgence in the realm of the permitted. And what a profound idea, because we spoke about this concept already a couple of times in Pirkei Avos, and we're only 5 Mishnayos in, but it is fascinating to see how much this theme of creating boundaries within the realm of the permitted comes up over and over and over again. That is the secret to Kedusha. Because if a person overindulges in the permitted, a person becomes a gluttonous individual. And what's the impact of becoming a gluttonous individual? Botel midivrei Torah. I'm going to negate, right? I'm going to go ahead and neglect my Torah study. I'm going to neglect my Torah study. I'm just going to be preoccupied with satisfying my urges, my wants, and my desires, that those are going to take precedence over my spiritual pursuits. The need to take care of my physical appetites is going to usurp the need to take care of my spiritual ones. Spirituality gets relegated ultimately again to the sidelines. And then what ends up happening? V'sofo yoresh gehenim. Now what is this? See, here's the problem. Overindulgence in the material, which ultimately leads me to a gluttonous lifestyle, inevitably leads to sin. Because once a person gets used to just overindulging, and it starts in a permitted way, and that leads to a gluttonous type of personality, at a certain point in time, a person is going to feel compelled to feed that gluttonous personality with other forms of behavior which are not permitted. So it's incredible. So it begins with an overindulgence of that which is permitted. That leads to a neglect of Torah study. Not because I don't love Torah. I love Torah very much. But because, again, I'm so focused on satisfying my physical urges that I forget about my spiritual needs. And where does this ultimately lead? Well, unfortunately, when a person becomes the kind of person who overindulges in even permitted physicality and neglects his spirituality, unfortunately, that paves the way to sin. And ultimately, again, a life of sin, unfortunately, chas v'shalom, paves the way, ultimately, to Gehenna. An incredibly, incredibly powerful yesod by Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim, teaching us about the need to create our proper boundaries, even within the realm of that which is permitted. Said chas v'shalom, we are not led astray. Okay, Shkoyach, everyone will stop over here for today. Shkoyach, have a great day.